What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today. And finally, now that Tuesday Night Football is complete, we can move forward to Week 6 and start talking some running back starts and sits here for all the matchups coming up here this week. But we got some big news, right? Le'Veon Bell has been released by the New York Jets, which is crazy because I was actually going to start Le'Veon Bell this week as a flex play, but nope, not anymore. So now we just need to pay attention and try to find a landing spot for him going forward. Some big bye weeks this week too. I mean, we're going to be without the likes of Alvin Kamara, Chris Carson, Josh Jacobs, the backfield of the Chargers, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, Dalvin Cook has already been ruled out here for Week 6. We got our work cut out for us here in Week 6. But before we get into all these matchups, let's take a look back at Week 5 and see how we did. And we continued to kill it on running backs. Right out of the 58 running backs we gave a start or sit designation to, 45 of them correct for an accuracy percentage of 78%. Some of our biggest hits had Mike Davis ranked inside the top 10. I think he was at 8. That wasn't even high enough. The dude had a great game. What happens with the potential return of Christian McCaffrey? David Montgomery finally found the end zone. Todd Gurley is maybe the only form of offense in Atlanta right now. Some of the misses, apparently it was a Darrell Henderson week in LA. Myles Gaskin had himself a solid matchup, and Devontae Freeman has really taken over that backfield for the Giants. Does it mean he's an absolute must-start every week? No. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but without taking up any more time, let's head into Week 6 and find out who we should start and sit for the running back position. All right, no Thursday Night Football, so we're heading right into Sunday. In the first matchup, Denver Broncos, New England Patriots, a game that has been 2 weeks in the making after being canceled last week, which irritated a lot of Denver Broncos players, right? They wanted to face the Patriots with no Cam Newton and no Stephon Gilmore. Game was canceled anyway, and now they're going to face the Patriots with probably Cam Newton and Stephon Gilmore. However, on the other side of things, they have Phillip Lindsay back, plus there's a chance that Drew Lock is back under center for the Broncos this week also. That changes the entire dynamic of this game. What about Melvin Gordon? What do we do with Melvin Gordon now that Phillip Lindsay is back? Well, Melvin Gordon's averaging 4.3 yards per carry, the second best number of his career. He's not playing bad whatsoever. And a lot of people just want to slot Phillip Lindsay into that pass-catching role, right? Guys, don't worry. Melvin Gordon's going to get first and second down. Phillip Lindsay will be in there on third down. Why do we assume that? He's not really just a pass-catching back. All of last year, he only had 35 receptions and had 7 drops, which was top 10 in the NFL. So kind of to expect him to just go into that pass-catching role, I really don't see it. They're going to split touches also, but I don't expect him to give Phillip Lindsay a full workload the first week coming back off of injury. We're still going to see a lot of Melvin Gordon, but it's a difficult matchup. Going up against the Patriots, they allow only 15 fantasy points per week, which is 9th best in the NFL. Do I love this for either one of these guys? No, I don't. I'll start Melvin Gordon still this week just to chase the volume because I still see him getting right around 15 to 18 touches. I prefer to sit Phillip Lindsay for 1 week. Let's get him a week to get back in the game flow and see how this split is used. If you're absolutely desperate, if you're suffering from injuries or whatever else it may be, Phillip Lindsay is a flex play. I don't hate it. I would just prefer to sit him here this week. But what about on the New England side of things? Well, last week we made a list, right? Fantasy or football coaches that hate your fantasy team is what we called it. And I think it's only fitting that we start another list here this week. And why not kick it off with the first matchup of the week? Because these are backfields that cause baldness. And New England's definitely one of them, right? You got Damian Harris, James White, Rex Burkhead. We've got to include Cam, right? Because Cam's going to call Cam's number quite a bit. And they're all involved on a weekly basis. Denver only allows 12 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, second best in the NFL. Now, if you're in a full PPR league, I don't hate James White. I'll throw him into the start column there because I think he has that safer floor. As for everybody else, Cam kind of eats that floor up a little bit himself, right? We saw Damian Harris succeed with no Cam Newton under center. To start the year, there really wasn't a rushing attack on the ground outside of Cam Newton for the most part. He's stealing all the touchdowns and really, limiting those ceilings. For that reason, with Cam back, I prefer just to avoid this backfield altogether. If you're absolutely desperate and you have to pick one of these guys, I'll go with Damian Harris, but it's not something that gives me that warm fuzzy on the inside, just because I don't trust Cam to not steal all the touchdowns close to the goal line. Next game we're moving on to Houston Texans, Tennessee Titans, and is there ever a question whether or not you should start Derrick Henry? Because there really shouldn't be, but this is a pretty good matchup for him going up against the Houston Texans, who allow over 25 fantasy points per game, 5th most in the NFL. Love some Derrick Henry this week. Plus, the Tennessee pass catchers are still not 100%. They're banged up, which means more Derrick Henry. Absolutely sign me up for Henry this week. What about for Houston? David Johnson. He's averaging right around 16 touches a game. He's not out there blowing the doors off of things with fantasy points, though. I get it. But Tennessee, middle-of-the-road run defense, and Duke Johnson isn't getting any more than about 8 carries a game. Like I said, DJ isn't killing it by any means, but he gives you a safe floor. He's a safe running back, too. Don't forget, when you drafted this guy in the 4th or the 5th round, you weren't reliant on him, hopefully, to be a running back 1, right? So the numbers he's producing, hopefully in your flex spots in some leagues, are great here as of late. Now, yeah, we want him to score more points, and he's had some difficult matchups to start the season. However, this one, not so bad, and he's still got that safe floor. I'll start David Johnson here in Week 6. Browns and Steelers in a matchup of two defenses that are pretty solid against the run, right? Both these teams allow less than 16.5 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So does that mean we don't start Kareem Hunt or James Conner? No, absolutely not. We're starting both of these guys. I mean, James Conner has seen on average 18 touches a game every game except for Week 1, where he only played 15 snaps due to an injury. He's had a touchdown in 3 straight games and has seen 63% of the snaps, which means he's not out there splitting very much with Benny Snell or Anthony McFarland. Now, his numbers this week could be fairly similar to last week, right? We're looking for him to find the end zone and to stay involved in the passing game. That's what gives him that safe floor, right? Anywhere from 12 to 18 points is a pretty safe projection for James Conner this week. What about Cleveland? There's no way you sit Kareem Hunt. He actually saw 70% of the snaps this past week, which means he's not going to split very much with Dearness Johnson. Nowhere near the split that we saw between him and Chubb. And a lot more Kareem Hunt means a lot more happy fantasy football owners. Last week, we saw Miles Sanders put up 99 total yards and 2 touchdowns against this defense. With the way that this team is constructed on the offensive side of the football, the Cleveland Browns and their run-heavy scheme, Kareem Hunt is a weekly must-start. Don't kid yourself. Lock him into your lineups no matter what. Ravens and Eagles, and yes, another backfield that causes baldness. Throw the Baltimore Ravens up on the list because they continue to use 3 running backs on a weekly basis. Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and J.K. Dobbins all splitting touches, which makes them really touchdown dependent. The hard part is who's going to get the touchdown, if any of them. Right now, Mark Ingram is averaging right around 4.6 yards per carry, which is solid. Problem is, he can't get more than 11 carries a week so far this year. Why is that? Well, Gus Edwards is averaging 5.6 yards per carry, and J.K. Dobbins is averaging 7.9 yards per carry. Yes, that's skewed a little bit because of the big play this past week, but still, they're all finding success. And that's leading to Baltimore being another one of the top rushing teams in the NFL. Again, currently number 2 in the NFL with 804 yards rushing on the year, 160 rushing yards a game. This backfield works for the NFL Ravens, but it's not going to work for fantasy football. And it makes it super difficult on a weekly basis to try to pinpoint who you can trust because, honestly, you can't trust any of these guys, and I would prefer to sit them all. If I have to take a stab on one of them, it's going to be Mark Ingram because he gets the most touches, and I'm hoping that he can find the end zone just to give that safer floor in a week that you may need it. But like I said, if you have the opportunity to avoid them all, I will. It just depends on the choices you have on your roster. For Philadelphia, you saw last week why we loved Miles Sanders so much this offseason. He only had 13 touches versus the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game in which his team lost. However, he still had 22 fantasy points in that game. Now he goes against the Ravens, who allow only 13.9 fantasy points per game. So another difficult matchup, but once again, the wide receiving weapons of the Philadelphia Eagles still banged up for like the 5th year straight. So we're still going to see a lot of Miles Sanders and the efficiency. If the efficiency can stay there, that is great news for you because if the volume goes up and the efficiency stays the same, you're looking for huge ceiling games on a weekly basis. If Miles Sanders can approach anything between 18 and 20 points this week, you are super pumped about it in a very difficult matchup. But regardless, there's no way you can sit Miles Sanders here this week. Football team and Giants up next, and I still love Antonio Gibson, even though last week, a little bit of a down game, right? 11 carries for 27 yards, 5 receptions for 24 yards, though to help a little bit there in any PPR type of scoring. And we saw more J.D. McKissic in the passing game than maybe anybody had really expected, right? However, the ceiling just isn't going to be there for J.D. McKissic. He's not somebody who I would consider starting at this point. Maybe if you're in a deeper 14, 16-team league, a PPR option, possibly as a flex play, but not outside of that for the normal 10 to 12-team leagues. We did see Gibson still get 5 targets, which is great to see on a weekly basis. Plus, did still see over 50% of the snaps. He's still the lead guy in that backfield. Now, before week 5, he'd had 3 straight games with a touchdown, and now he gets a matchup against the New York Giants, who allow just about 21 fantasy points per game. This is a much better matchup this week for one Antonio Gibson. However, another thing we don't want to ignore, currently right now, he's 5th in the NFL among all running backs in goal line carries, and that's what we're looking for, that touchdown opportunity. Hopefully he can find the end zone here this week. For the Giants, this backfield is kind of cleared up a little bit, right? It looks like Devonta Freeman has taken over this backfield. He's had 15-plus touches back-to-back weeks now, and he's not being too overly efficient with them. The guy's got some work to do just to get over 4 yards per carry, but the volume is there, and we talked about it earlier, right? If we can find a guy in this type of circumstances getting 15-plus touches a week, it's really hard to sit him at this point. Going up against the football team who allow 19 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, Devonta Freeman is a solid bye-week fill-in flex play, injury replacement if need be here this week in week 6. Falcons and Vikings in 2020 just keeps on giving and giving, doesn't it? What are they giving us now? An injury to Dalvin Cook. He's already been ruled out, will not play in week 6. They're on bye week 7, which means no Dalvin Cook for you for 2 weeks, and it's horrible timing, right? He gets a matchup going up against the Atlanta Falcons, and he's not going to be there. But Alexander Mattison is, and this is his time to shine because the Atlanta defense is weaker than single-ply toilet paper at this point. Alexander Mattison could be in for a big day. He finished week 5 with 20 carries for 112 yards, added 3 receptions for 24 yards against the Seahawks. Got a lot more work after Dalvin Cook left that game. And he's a very capable running back, right? He has a huge ceiling. In fact, if you really don't pay that close attention, he looks like Dalvin Cook when he's on the field. Very explosive, quick feet, quick decisions. He can make things happen quickly and has that game-breaking speed still. I love Alexander Mattison. He's probably one of the top handcuffs in all of the NFL, and now you get to reap the rewards from an absolutely fire-up Alexander Mattison. For Atlanta, you got Todd Gurley, who continues just to be solid, right? A lot of people, hated on Todd Gurley in the offseason. He's not what he used to be. You're right, he's not, but he wasn't drafted as something as he used to be. He was drafted in the 3rd round, maybe as your running back 3, maybe your number 2, and he's currently running back 10 overall, averaging 15 fantasy points per game, and he's finding the end zone. Arguably the best option in that offense with no Julio Jones on the field. Going up against Minnesota, they allow right around 20 fantasy points per game, and Gurley hasn't had a game yet with less than 15 touches. 15 touches equals a start these days. Fire up Todd Gurley once again. We can't sit that volume or that touchdown upside at this point. Lions and Jags, and do you know where Matt Patricia and the Detroit Lions belong? That's right. On the list of backfields that cause baldness, throw them on the list because DeAndre Swift, Adrian Peterson, and Kerryon Johnson all get touches on a weekly basis, right? And now they're coming off the bye week. What is there to expect in this backfield going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars? Yep, Adrian Peterson more than likely will see the bulk of the carries on the ground. DeAndre Swift, more than likely going to see the bulk of the passing work. What about Kerryon Johnson? He's basically just in the middle picking up whatever scraps are left over at this point. It really sucks too because this is a great matchup. The Jags allow over 22 fantasy points per game to opposing running back, but Detroit runs less than most teams in the NFL, right? They're just not known for running the football effectively or a lot, right? Matthew Stafford is back there to throw the ball as much as possible. I don't want to trust any of these guys. I don't want to start any of them, but if I have to, what are we doing? We're chasing the volume, and as of right now, Adrian Peterson leading this backfield in touches is the one I would go with in hopes that he can find the end zone, but he's the only guy that I would risk it with. Maybe in a deeper league, a PPR league, DeAndre Swift, who in my opinion is the best back in this backfield and should get more touches. He could be a decent flex play if you're looking for somebody here as a bye week fill-in in those deeper leagues. For Jacksonville, James Robinson was a disappointment last week, right? Everybody loved, myself included, James Robinson. The writing was on the wall for a huge week. 13 carries for 48 yards, 5 catches for 22, and a fumble. Not what we were expecting. Not a huge week for James Robinson, but we're not going to abandon the guy, right? He's played great all year long, and now he gets a matchup going up against the Detroit Lions, who allow over 28 fantasy points per game. That's the most in the NFL. So fire up James Robinson. Once again, I'm looking for him to have a bounce-back week here in Week 6. Bengals and Colts in another tough matchup for Joe Mixon, right? I mean, he struggled against the Baltimore Ravens a little bit last week. Had 24 carries, only 59 yards, but did add 6 receptions for 35. The volume is definitely there, right? That's back-to-back weeks now with at least 24 carries, 6 targets, and 76% of the snaps. Even though it's a difficult matchup going up against the Colts, who only allow 13.5 fantasy points per game, the amount of volume he sees makes him a must-start here once again this week. It just really limits the ceiling due to the matchup. For the Colts, throw him on the list because it's another backfield that's causing baldness once again. Jonathan Taylor saw his fewest touches in a game since Week 1. His very first game ever as a pro, he saw fewer touches in Week 5. Nyheim Hines, Jordan Wilkins, everybody is a hit or miss weekly in this backfield. And it's so irritating because with one of the better offensive lines in all of the NFL, if they could really commit to one of these guys, commit to 20 touches a week, especially if it's Jonathan Taylor, we'd be in for a very safe floor on a weekly basis. One of the bigger problems, Phillip Rivers can't move the ball down the field consistently through the air, and it's allowing defenses just to stack boxes and take away the running game. It's really, hurting the ceilings of all of these guys. You can't not sit Jonathan Taylor, right? I mean, Cincinnati allows just about 21 fantasy points per game. And if Taylor can get these touches, if he can get right around 15 to 18 touches, I think he delivers a solid 13 to 15 point floor here this week. If he can find the end zone a time or two, that'll be an absolute bonus. It's a risk, right? Because none of these guys are just, must starts weekly, but the volume is there for Jonathan Taylor still. So we'll start him here once again in Week 6. Bears and Panthers, and is this the week that Christian McCaffrey returns? It's entirely possible, but do they need him to yet? Do they need to rush him back? Because Mike Davis has been balling. Plus, the Panthers are 3-0 without Christian McCaffrey. Over that span, Mike Davis running back 3 and has seen 33 targets. I mean, the guy is playing absolutely great. Now, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not out here saying that Mike Davis is better than Christian McCaffrey. What I'm saying is, the Panthers are still playing for something, right? They didn't just tank with no Christian McCaffrey. They're tied for the division lead right now. They have something to play for. I would think that they wouldn't want to rush CMC back in order to make sure that they have him healthy down the stretch in case they're actually in contention, which a lot of people, myself included, did not expect. So pay attention to these reports. If he's practicing fully by the end of the week, I'll start Christian McCaffrey. If he's limited at all throughout the week, or we don't know going into the weekend, I'll fire up Mike Davis. It's kind of hard to sit Christian McCaffrey if he's active, so we really need to pay attention to those practice reports and try to get a good gauge on whether or not he's going to be on a snap count or not. If he plays, I have to imagine that he will be. Like I said, they don't want to risk it here rest of the season, especially going up against the Bears. They allow 17.8 fantasy points per game. Just need to kind of wait and see on this one. But Mike Davis, if Christian McCaffrey is limited, Mike Davis still another solid start. For Chicago, love seeing 8 targets in a game for David Montgomery. Really helps with the safe floor. The Panthers allow right around 27.5 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And I'm looking for a lot more David Montgomery going forward. Cordero Patterson's still going to get a few touches in this backfield, but the bulk of the touches should be heading the way of David Montgomery. Should see right around 15 to 18 touches on a weekly basis. If this game can stay close, if the Bears defense can step up and shut down Bridgewater and Anderson and DJ Moore on the outside, it's going to give them an opportunity in Chicago to continue to pound the rock with David Montgomery, and hopefully he can break a big one here this week. I'm going to start David Montgomery in Week 6. Now we move on to the Jets and the Dolphins, and we talked about it earlier, right? No more Le'Veon Bell in New York. That was a cluster F in New York, right? He just never fit from the beginning, but don't get me wrong, I still think a lot of that falls on the shoulders of Adam Gase and his inability to put great players in good positions. I mean, we've seen it in numerous cases, right? Even Devontae Parker, a former Adam Gase player, is shining without Adam Gase. I mean, it's just, it's hard to ignore at this point, right? I mean, this is the glaring problem, but instead of getting rid of Gase, they get rid of Le'Veon Bell. Now they have $17 million in, dead cap space. It's a huge question mark. What is it going to be going forward? Well, Frank Gore is a thing again, and maybe LaMichael Pirine is a name that we should maybe start to mention. Is he a start? No. Why is he not a start? It's still the Jets in this offense, which is highly inefficient at best. So I'm not really targeting either one of these guys. Frank Gore, if you're in a deeper league looking for a flex play, dealing with a bunch of injuries or bye weeks, whatever it may be, okay, maybe possibly, because he could see close to that threshold of 15 touches or so, going against Miami now, who allows 24 fantasy points per week. Not a bad matchup, but honestly, not interested at all in Frank Gore or LaMichael Pirine just yet in fantasy football. Now, on the Miami side of things, Myles Gaskin has seen 20-plus touches 2 out of the last 3 weeks, but they're not all that efficient, right? 3.9 yards per carry. However, he also has 5 receptions per game in 3 out of his last 4 games. The Jets allowed just over 24 fantasy points per game, and last week, Jordan Howard was just a healthy scratch. They're very determined to get Myles Gaskin involved in this offense, and as of right now, this is his backfield to lose. He's getting the volume. The ceiling may not be crazy high, but the floor just gets safer and safer on a week-by-week basis. I don't mind starting Myles Gaskin here this week. Battle of the Bays, Green Bay and Tampa Bay now, and it's nice to have Aaron Jones back in your lineup. It's going to be nice to have Devontae Adams back in your lineup, more than likely, too. Now, it's slightly concerning before the bye week that we saw so much Jamal Williams, right? He actually outsnapped Aaron Jones in their last game before the bye week, 36-33, but the Packers had a lead. They were basically just, Aaron Rodgers out there carving up the defense. They didn't really need Aaron Jones, so I get it, I guess, somewhat. But now they have a matchup going up against Tampa Bay, who allows right around 15 fantasy points per game. A overall super solid run defense there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but this really all relies on Aaron Rodgers, right? If he can keep the passing game open, and if he gets Devontae Adams back, I have no reason to believe that he won't. That's going to continue to open running lanes and opportunities and touchdown opportunities for Aaron Jones, so he's going to remain in the start column. For Tampa Bay, there's a chance that Leonard Fournette is back this week. He was already back at practice, but what does that mean for Ronald Jones, who honestly has been playing pretty well? He has back-to-back 100-yard games, and now a matchup going up against the Green Bay Packers, who allow over 27 fantasy points, second most in the NFL to opposing running backs. I'll be completely honest here. I was this close to making Ronald Jones my Manscaped must-start of the week. The reason that I didn't is because of the opportunity that Leonard Fournette comes back and the instability of the backfield and the usage of one Bruce Arians. Yes, Rojo's been playing great, but would it totally surprise me for Leonard Fournette to come out and out-touch Ronald Jones this week? It really wouldn't. You never know with this backfield. However, I'll still start Ronald Jones. I like the potential matchup here this week going up against the Green Bay Packers. Rams and Niners, and let's move on to the last backfield that causes baldness, the Los Angeles Rams. Why? Well, they got Cam Akers, Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson. They're all involved. They're all getting between 8 and 15 touches a week, and they're all touchdown dependent. Now, Akers could be the future of this backfield. We saw him bust off a big play this past week, but Darrell Henderson is not going away, and he's still leading this backfield in touches. Malcolm Brown starting to fade away a little bit. This could be down to a 2-horse race between Henderson and Akers here pretty soon, but you just don't know in this backfield. For this week, going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who only allow 13 fantasy points per game, which is third best in the NFL, I prefer to sit all 3 of these guys. But just, similar to some of the other teams we've talked about, if you have to choose one, I'll choose Darrell Henderson to start because he's still leading this backfield in touches, and overall, as a whole, this has been a pretty solid running team in Los Angeles. The problem is it's split up between 3 people. Darrell Henderson's the one guy. I'll take a stab on it if I need to. Now for San Francisco, let's move on to my Manscaped must-start of the week, Raheem Mostert. Now, he was my 2020 breakout in our draft guide this past year. I absolutely love the potential of him in this offense. He kind of reminds me of an Aaron Jones type running back in San Francisco, right? He's not overly dependent on getting 20 to 25 touches, big playability, touchdown upside, and even though this offense looked like hammered dog crap last week, Raheem Mostert continues to be the bright spot. The way they move him around the offense, when they put him in the slot, in the backfield, the big plays, they're still there. He's averaging 7 yards a carry. He's currently running back 25 and has missed 2 games this week. Now, it's not the easiest of matchups going up against the Rams, who allow 17 fantasy points per game, but I cannot sit Raheem Mostert. He's going to be my must-start here this week. All right, so we said at the beginning, no Thursday night football. However, we have a doubleheader Monday night football. First game being Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills, and people are starting to get impatient with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? Only 1 touchdown on the season. A little bit disappointing for a lot of his owners. He just needs more volume, right? I mean, last week in that game, Patrick Mahomes had 6 rushing attempts. Clyde Edwards-Helaire only had 10. Now he gets a matchup going up against the Buffalo Bills, who allow on average right around 13 fantasy points per game. One of the league leaders in the NFL. Is a very tough matchup for him once again. However, you can't sit him. You got to be patient. The big games are going to happen at some point in this offense. The offense as a whole in Kansas City just looks a little bit off, but the points will come. The days will get better. You can't afford to sit Clyde Edwards-Helaire, especially where you drafted him. For Buffalo, it's hard to sit Devin Singletary also. I mean, the Buffalo offense still one of the best in the NFL, and Singletary is going to average right around 15 to 18 touches a week and be involved in the passing game. Kansas City allows right around 21.5 fantasy points per game, which is 9th most in the NFL, and Josh Jacobs found success against this team last week, found the end zone a couple times. Can they involve Devin Singletary enough? Do they have enough weapons on the outside to pull defenders out of the box to open those running lanes? I think they do, and I still like Devin Singletary here in Week 6. Second game of the doubleheader, Arizona Cardinals, Dallas Cowboys, and we save the best for last because everybody wants to talk about Kenyon Drake versus Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals. And just like we sat on this show last week talking about Kenyon Drake being a disappointment, the same thing happened for the most part. I mean, he found the end zone. That saved a lot of people this last week, but he's still not involved in the passing game, and that is the biggest problem for Kenyon Drake. Last year with Arizona, he averaged almost 4 receptions a game. He's lucky to get 1 target in a game now this year. And there's tons of people out there calling for Chase Edmonds to take over this backfield. Chase is better. Drake sucks. Be careful what you ask for, because if Chase Edmonds takes over this role, he's going to be the one put in the bad position like Kenyon Drake is right now, running between the tackles and maybe even loses some passing game work. I don't think you want that if you're a Chase Edmonds owner. Right now, Dallas allows right around 20 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Both of these guys, flex options for the most part, right? You just got to make sure you look at the entire situation and not just write it off as Drake sucks, because you look at the box score. Pay attention to what's going on. Watch some film on it to see why he's not being efficient before making those decisions, because all you end up doing is coming out with a statement about Chase Edmonds that could in turn hurt the value of one Chase Edmonds. So that's just something we need to pay attention to here going forward. Yes, Drake has been a disappointment. Can we sit him just yet? The volume is still there, right? He's getting over 15 touches a week. It's really hard to sit him in a time like this. For Dallas, I mean, you never sit Zeke, right? A lot of people want to say, well, what does it mean for Zeke because of the Dak injury, which we absolutely hate to see? And honestly, I don't think it hurt Zeke very much. Andy Dalton's still a very capable quarterback there under center, and this is the best weapons he's ever had as a whole in his career. Right now, Arizona giving up right around 21.5 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, but it doesn't matter. Zeke's going to average right around 20 points a week and always be in your starting lineup. All right, so those are my starts and sits for the running back position here, Week 6 fantasy football. We may see eye to eye, we may disagree a little bit, and that is okay. Remember, this is all about perspective. Kind of seeing somebody else's point of view on a matchup to help you make the decisions. We don't set your lineups for you. We just try to help those decisions be a little bit easier for you on game day. If you appreciate that, make sure you do us a favor and hit the thumbs up button. It greatly helps us out here on YouTube. And if you're looking for all things football all year long, you found the right channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're inching our way closer to 110,000, and we are very, very appreciative of that. going forward. Very much so. If you're looking for guaranteed answers to your fantasy football questions, I know we get a lot of comments on a weekly basis. That can all be done through Patreon. The link is down below in the description. Check out that website, and we have a few different tiers of options of things that you can check out, DFS and everything else included, even an audio podcast there on Patreon if you're looking for more content. But we greatly appreciate the support out there. Good luck this week, and we'll talk to you later.